Welcome to Authors Revealed. I'm Becky Anderson. I'm so excited. One of my favorite authors is here. It's Jonathan Stroud. He wrote the trilogy, the Bartimaeus trilogy. I absolutely love those books. But he's here for the fourth book in the Lockwood and Company books. And this one is called The Creeping Shadow. If you love ghost books, you're going to love this one. Well, Jonathan, it's great to have you back here at Anderson's in Naperville.
No, it's wonderful to be here.
Yeah,
it's been a while.
Well, no, and I remember when you came for the Bartimaeus trilogy.
Oh, I remember it very well, particularly the one on my birthday, where you guys made me a lovely cake, and we all sang Happy Birthday. That was excellent.
Yeah,
that's way back now.
Oh, we love that series. I still remember that so fondly, reading all three of those books. So.
I'm really pleased.
Now, congrats on number 4, though, of this series.
Thank you.
For Lockwood and Company, and the fourth book in the series, The Creeping Shadow.
Thank you.
So, what are you hearing? I know you have a lot of readers that follow you with this series. They absolutely adore this book, as well as I keep hearing from kids who've read the Bartimaeus trilogy. But knowing that this is the fourth book, what are you hearing now? Because the book's been out maybe almost 2 months. Right?
Sure.
And what are you hearing from those readers that love the previous 3, or maybe readers who are new to this series?
Well, there are some strands with all these books.
Yeah.
You try to keep each book separate and have its own little plot, have its own ghosts and its own mysteries, but you have an overarching story. And so by the time you get to number 4, we're kind of getting pretty deep into the background puzzle about why all these ghosts are turning up. And so the thing that I've heard most, I think, from my readers is that we're very happy that we're starting to get a few clues about what's going on. And also there's the issue of my 2 heroes, Lockwood and Lucy, and their relationship, which has been sort of ongoing through the series. And people are quite animated about where that's going. So hopefully I'm doing the right thing there.
Yeah. So where did the seed start to grow for the first book, which was the Screaming Staircase? So where did the whole idea, and the whole idea of ghosts and paranormal and the psychic kind of thing?
Well, I've always loved ghost stories ever since I was a kid. One of my teachers, I think often things start with teachers, and I had an English teacher who came in to our class when I was about 13, and it was a class of sort of sweaty, grumpy boys, and we were all sitting there, and he came in and he said, "No work today, lads, I'm going to read you a ghost story." And he sat with his feet up on the desk and he read us a story by a guy called M.R. James called A School Story, about a rather unpleasant ghost that turns up in a school, and it was really kind of nasty and really brilliant, and I was blown away, and I rushed away and bought this guy's stories, and ever since then I've been kind of itching to do my own spooky thing. And a few years ago I wrote a scene with a boy and a girl, modern clothes, swords. They were kind of walking up to a front door in modern London. They knocked on the door and they were going to deal with a ghost. And I loved this scene. I had no idea what the story was. That was completely sort of unknown. But I had this one little beautiful little nugget of a scene, which is where everything expanded from.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I love about this series. It's set in contemporary. Yeah. You know, it's what kids can totally relate to, but it has those elements of the past and all these different elements, like you said, with the swords and different things like that. That's what I think is the real magic of this. Instead of having it set in a historical setting.
Yeah, and that was a really early decision because some of my editors were kind of keen. Oh, do you want to set it in Victorian London and go for the whole Dickensian thing? And I really didn't want to do that. With Bartimaeus, it was a kind of modern London, but with one twist, which was that magic has changed everything, and the magicians are ruling the country and all the rest of it. But with this, the one twist is that there's an epidemic of ghosts which has been causing carnage for 50 years, and so it's modern, but it's kind of gone off on a skewed trajectory, and so you haven't got computers and you haven't got mobile phones, and it's kind of like the 1970s, I think, because it's kind of modern but at the same time quite primitive.
Yeah. So when you write a series like this, and like you would have done for Bartimaeus, do you sort of set the rules out? So when you're writing, subsequent books in the series, that you're keeping to your facts and sort of the rules of plot or the world that you've created, even though this is still contemporary in many ways. Because kids will catch every little mistake.
They so will. I mean, I still remember a time in the Bartimaeus years when I went to Australia and I got off the plane, and the next day I did an event, and I was totally jet lagged, and I was a bit kind of muggy headed. And the first event I did, this kid just put his hand up at the end of my thing and asked me a question so complicated, so specific about why on page 463 of the third book I'd said this about Bartimaeus, and in the first book I'd said that, and the two just didn't, and I couldn't answer him. It was too, he'd beaten me. So I'm aware that there's always a potential for that kind of precision. So you need to figure out your rules, particularly for fantasy books. Actually, ironically, because your readers will immediately spot if you're fudging it.
Right. So Antony Lockwood. So Lockwood in this. Tell us where he comes from, and is he part of you, or is he a composite, or is he something totally of your imagination?
He's part of me. He's kind of like an idealized version of one aspect of me. I mean, in fact, as some people have pointed out, Antony is my middle name. So he, there's a very definite kind of, I suppose, deliberate link. Yeah. But he's sort of like a swashbuckling version of what I'd quite like to be, kind of confident and debonair and kind of wearing a swanky coat and, cruising out, killing ghosts and things. We'd all like to be like that, and I'm actually, unfortunately, more like George, who's the sort of slightly
George Cummins,
kind of scruffy.
No,
but it's slightly more ordinary and sarcastic. So yeah.
But the characters, and Lucy, I love this character, Lucy Carlyle. You have created such a great female character here.
Good.
And she's sort of she's your psychic, the one who can really get into the psychic and the clairvoyance and whatever those kind of things. And I love her character though.
And she's really she is the key, because Lockwood is great, and he's very dashing, very mysterious.
Charismatic.
He's charismatic, and you've got mystery about him, and you don't know you don't know all his secrets. But Lucy she's our narrator. She is us. She's our vehicle through which we experience everything, and she develops. And over the last 4 years, I've been getting to know her, and hopefully sort of deepening her character. And she's very special to me. I mean, and I suppose she's an aspect of me as well. Despite the fact that she's a girl. I mean, she's key. Yeah.
But she's also what you see in some series. Things don't change, and the characters don't develop, and they don't acquire new skills or see things differently. But you totally do that with these kids in this book. So this whole series, you do see them, growing in their roles.
I'm really pleased about that. That's definitely my hope.
Yeah.
I mean, I and the key is that Lucy and Lockwood and George are. They're teenagers, and the fact that they go out and risk their lives every night fighting ghosts is kind of one part of their life, but actually equally important is the fact they're going to be in a house together, grumbling about who's doing the washing up, and kind of Lucy getting upset when Lockwood makes a sort of sarcastic comment about her clothes or whatever. The stuff that we all experience, and actually that's the bit that I love writing most, actually, those little sort of moments of intimacy.
You've always put that humor in those scenes like that in your writings, which is so great, because it makes it more real. It really does.
I think that's more and more as a writer and a reader of fantasy. I think the fantasy that means most to me is one where it's really only a step away from the real world. That's when you can kind of actually relate to it and enjoy the magic. That's. I'm glad that's the effect.
Yeah. So, did you do any research during this series just on the paranormal, ghosts, and anything like that, the psychic phenomena? Did you do anything like that to research anything, or is it more just
It's mainly just kind of made up. I mean, obviously, to be fair, over the years I've read lots of stuff about. I've read a lot of ghost stories. I've read lots of folklore, and a lot of the rules that we use in this particular book are things like ghosts don't like iron, they don't like silver, they don't like salt, and that's all old. That's all good, honest, traditional folkloric sort of belief. And I've just stolen it and then given it a bit of a twist so that my heroes go around with their sort of utility belts with salt bombs, and they have the rapiers, and I turn it into my own little mythology. But it's fundamentally, old sort of tried and tested beliefs, and that kind of makes it more real in a sort of weird way, even though it's all made up. It's using existing mythology in a new way.
Yeah. So in number 4 here we have the ghost of a pretty legendary cannibal on the loose, right? So the cover is so great for this, but also too there are things happening in a village where ghosts are starting to rise out of graveyards and stuff like that. So, but the thing is in this book, and we don't want to give too many spoilers.
You've got to be careful. It's true.
Yes, I don't want to. But with Lucy is now freelancing. She is not working with Lockwood & Company.
That's right. That was the big thing at the end of book 3. That she left the company for various reasons.
Right, and we don't want to say, but there's a tension that's going on with this.
Yes.
So, but then Lockwood and Cubbins, they need her help. Right?
They do, and so quite early on in the story, Antony Lockwood turns up at her door unexpectedly and asks her if she'll come and help. And she's in two minds. Well, really, she's in one mind because she wants to go back and help them out, but she's in a retrograde step. And she goes back, and they deal with this rather unpleasant cannibal ghost of a cannibal. I thought, well, what would be the most scary ghost to meet? I mean, all ghosts, potentially scary, but the ghost of a large and rather unpleasant cannibal, that's got to be up there. So I had a lot of fun doing
a ghost that can eat you.
That's right.
right. So their relationship between Antony and Lucy. So tell us a little bit about that, and because you've seen that change throughout the series.
I have, and I've got to tread very carefully on this.
Yes,
because,
right.
But also I have to tread carefully in the book because the last thing you want to do is to make it sort of heavy-handed. Lucy's telling the story, and in the first book, The Screaming Staircase, she gets the job with Antony Lockwood, at his house, and he's so very, very dashing. And clearly, in the first book, she thinks he's kind of quite interesting, and she quite admires him. And in the first book, she's definitely much less experienced and looks up to him. As the series progresses, her powers increase and she gets more confident and actually they're much more. By the time you get to the fourth book, they're much more on an even sort of playing field, which is really that's important. It's kind of that's a key aspect of Lucy actually, that she is becoming, despite herself, she's actually becoming his equal. And he finds that, I think, probably inwardly he finds that kind of quite a bit unsettling.
He's being challenged.
He is challenged. I mean, he likes it. He likes it also, but it's not easy for him either.
Well, I mentioned the humor that you put into this, but there's one thing I do like in Lucy's The Skull in the Jar, the comments.
Oh yes,
that is so much fun. Yeah.
My friend the Skull.
Yeah, your friend the Skull.
I think there's something in me that requires a kind of sarcastic supernatural entity to appear at some point, because my good old Bartimaeus back in the old days, he was the sort of originator of this. And this skull in the first book, the skull is just there. He's kind of mute, and he only speaks at the end of the first book. And I realised actually in the second book that he's a potentially good character. He can sit on the sidelines. He's essentially pretty evil, but he's also kind of quite perceptive actually, and he'll utter truths that Lucy and Antony Lockwood can't necessarily express themselves.
So outlining, I always wonder, but for a series, and knowing how many books do you know how many books will be in the series yet?
I'm thinking 5.
5.
I think that there's definitely going to be one more next year. Yeah.
So when you started the first one, did you know where it would end?
No.
So this is taking you like it does us, right?
That's right, and that's important. I mean, I know that some writers will plan everything at the beginning. But I think you've got to have some idea of where you're going.
Right.
But I think you also need, like as in life, you need to keep yourself open to the unexpected. Otherwise, you get quite set in your ways, and it all gets a bit mechanical. So even now, I'm working on book 5.
Okay.
I know what I think is going to happen. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to get to it, and I will find out as I write it. There's still an element of
it's surprising you, but when you're
it keeps me on my. It keeps me nervous. It keeps
I love
me,
that.
And I think it's important.
Right. So writing a series. And there's always some people who complain, well, it was a trilogy and the middle book was really lame, it wasn't as good as it was just that bridge between the first and the third. But how do you accomplish this with each book is such a great book in itself, and doesn't need it's connected to the others, absolutely, but it can stand on its own. And I think you do such a great job where you're not leaving the reader disappointed with each and every book, because it just makes them want the next one that much more.
Oh, this is good.
Yeah,
this is good news.
right.
Well, I mean, I do get people getting a bit grumpy with me because I always put a little bit of a cliffhanger at the end, just to kind of springboard you into the next. Right. But I think it goes back to the fact that I try to keep things open as I go. So with each book, I'm treating it like a standalone, which just happens to have continuity from the previous one and is looking sort of forwards, but I want it to exist on its own merits so that you have a proper trajectory within it, and it's a balance. You've got to seed all sorts of other things that will tie in the rest, but you're right. I think if you just see it as a big big old series going from A to B, then the ones in the middle are going to sag. They have to have their own drama, their own plot, so their own character development, which is the key. But that's the plan. I mean, you give it your best shot.
Oh no, and it's because it's so great to see this series from number one. It has grown in popularity. It's just incredible to see after the first and the second, and then kids just cannot wait for the next one. So,
in a way, it was a kind of it was a sort of gamble, because I undertook, because I tend to write quite slowly, I think, and doing one a year was a sort of fairly was a fair push for me. But actually, as I said, no, I will do one a year, and that means exactly that you can quickly, people can read it, and it's not long before the next one comes out, and that has built a bit of momentum.
Right.
And you're expanding the world with each book. That's the other thing, I suppose, that the first book, it's quite a kind of tight focus on the three characters, and with each one I'm learning more about how everything works and bringing in more characters. So you do get kind of quite a satisfying deepening, I suppose, as you go.
And but it's incredible that the publishing schedule that you have for a series like this, it's fast.
Yeah.
Is that a challenge? And do you feel like that it puts it must put a lot of pressure on you? But to know that you have to write this and I have to have this done in less than a year, so it is that yearly publication date.
It's a challenge, and but it's kind of a good challenge, I think, because otherwise you could potentially, or I could keep drifting and dragging things out and kind of trying to change things. And I know that my lovely editor in New York is kind of looking at her watch, and she's expecting book number 5 in March. So as of now, I've probably got another, say 4 months to write the book, which isn't very long, really.
Right.
So there's an element of raw fear that keeps me. It kind of keeps me going, keeps my pen moving.
Well, it's that. What did they say? Is the ultimate inspiration is that deadline, and that is the ultimate
I think
inspiration.
it's necessary. It's like the the National Novel Writing Month thing in November.
Oh yeah.
I think it's a brilliant thing, because it forces you. It's totally arbitrary.
Right.
But actually, it's like, no, I have to do this by that deadline, and you do it, and then sure, you can change it later. You can fiddle around afterwards, but you make it. The book exists at the end of that time.
Right. So your love of fantasy, where did it begin for you? How old were you?
Oh, then that's a good question. See, my automatic thing would be to say, we began with Tolkien, with The Hobbit when I was about sort of 7 or something. Lord of the Rings when I was 10. I read Lord of the Rings, great. Yeah. But I suspect it was even earlier, because actually a lot of the other classics of children's books are fantasies in their different ways. And you're going back to the Wind in the Willows. That was one of my. I still really rate that. Yeah. And even my very very first books that I loved, things like Richard Scarry and Go Dog Go. What a great book! I mean, that's a kind of a fantasy with some dogs in a car.
Sure.
So your imagination is teased, and you accept things if they sort of internally they're internally logical, and some of those very early ones did the job for me.
Right. So I read that you loved to draw when you were young. Do you still do any art? And do you still draw with?
I doodle.
You doodle?
I scribble. When I'm writing these books, and I'll have my notebooks, I'll be sort of scribbling things, and making little plans, and so fundamentally I don't do very much. But early on, I used to make comics and do a lot of drawing. In fact, drawing and writing were kind of almost equally important. Yeah. And at some point, I kind of tilted. The words sort of took over. Yeah. But early on, it was very evenly balanced.
And writing, how did you decide? Because you ask a lot of authors and writers, did you intend to write for a particular audience or age? And what you've written for are those middle grade age children, but into young adult.
Yeah.
And did you decide that's what you wanted, or that's just the way the story went for you when you first had your first book published?
No, that's true. I suppose it's a bit of both, because you have to find your own voice as a writer. It doesn't matter who you are. Yeah. You explore. You try different things, and then finally you hit on what your voice is. And I hit on my voice when I invented Bartimaeus, and he came out with all these sort of jokes, but it was fundamentally, it wasn't frivolous. It was a proper sort of serious story. But he was great. And when I was writing him, I very consciously thought, the book that I'm creating with all its footnotes and things, this book is a book that I would have loved when I was 12 years old.
I love those footnotes.
The footnotes were great, and they were kind of a revelation to me. It's like, oh my gosh,
they were so cool.
I can do this.
I love those.
It's playful and it's kind of weird, and you can do things. And as an adult, I knew that if I'd read this book, I would have loved it, as a sort of 30. But I knew also that I would have loved it if I was 12. And I was kind of writing for my young self and my adult self at the same time, and I think that's the double perspective that I would still try to do with these.
But these are it's great for an adult reader, as they are.
I hope so. I think that's the aim. Yeah. I don't want to get bored if I read that. I don't want to get bored by it. So I have to try and make it. The style. I want the style to be sort of sufficiently good that I'm not, sagging in my seat as I read it.
Right. So I know you were an editor at Walker Books in London, and I mentioned to you before we sat down that my daughter just did a short internship there.
Fantastic.
And so how did that, as an editor, and working with other people on their children's books, how did that influence you in sort of editing yourself, or how did it inform you in your writing life, having that previous life?
Do you know that it was, for me, it was a really key thing, because I think I was at Walker and another company off and on for maybe sort of eight years. I was an editor before I was a writer, and the two things are so inextricably linked. As a writer, I don't think it doesn't matter whether you're a novelist or you're someone writing at home. You don't get it right first time, so you get things down, and you are not afraid to, as an editor, you're not afraid to cross things out and move things around, and that doesn't work, I'll try it again. And once you get relaxed about that, once you accept that's part of the deal, then it kind of makes writing a lot easier. You're freer. You just give it a go. You have a bad day, doesn't matter. You'll use 3 words from it, but they're good words.
Right.
And I remember being very frightened when I started at Walker Books, and I was handing I wrote something, I'll give it to somebody else to read. I used to get very nervous. Oh, people are going to not like what I've written. Right. And it kind of it relaxes you. You think, okay, sure, maybe I have to change it, but we'll get there.
So, when you're editing yourself, you make it easy on your editor because of your previous position of being an editor?
So.
Yeah, you must.
I think so, because my aim will be that when I hand it into my editor, I will basically feel like it is nearly there. And inevitably, she or I've got several great editors. They will find things inevitably, and that's great. You need their input, but you want to iron out most of the wrinkles yourself. I think that's the aim, definitely. Sure. Yeah.
I know you've done a lot of school events over the years, and bookstore events and that type of thing.
Yeah.
Here in the UK and other places, do you pretty much find that readers, kids, are the same no matter where you go, and their questions are the same? Or do you see there's a different something in translation from one country to another?
That's a great question. Fundamentally, I think everyone's the same. You always get new. The interesting thing is you always get new questions. I've been doing it. I think I first came to see you guys in 2003. And I've been touring and promoting, all this time, and I still get new questions, pretty much every school I go to, which is kind of crazy. Obviously, you get ones that you had before, but you get. But I think it doesn't matter whether I'm in Japan or in Germany or in America, UK. The sort of creativity and the interest and the kind of connection with your reader is is the same.
It's universal.
It's universal. Yeah. You might have a different audience. Like sometimes, like in Germany, I'll go to Germany, and often the audience will be kind of largely adult, and they will, they might want me to sit and actually read for 20 minutes, like a long paragraph. Whereas if I'm doing in the US or the UK, my assumption is they want a kind of shorter bit of reading and a bit more interaction. So it's a different style.
Sure.
But the fundamental connection is it's the same.
Yeah. So you mentioned you're working on number 5.
Yep.
Anything else that you can tell us about? Or are you going to be?
Well, it's called the working title is the Empty Grave. Yes, the Empty Grave, which it's got potential.
Okay.
And I've written about 100 pages so far. Yeah. And about another 4 months to go. It'll come out this next fall, so probably September. Yeah. I'm sure my publishers have already penciled in a date, kind of nerve-wrackingly. And it's going to be good, I think, because a lot of the threads that have been dangling through these 4 books are going to have to kind of come and be tied up to a certain degree. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge for me.
Okay, can't wait. So Jonathan, I end these interviews with a quick little quiz.
Okay.
They're all books about you and your reading life. Okay. So there are no wrong answers on this one.
Okay, fine.
So you're guaranteed a A+.
Okay, great.
What was your favorite book when you were a child?
I'm going to say Richard Scarry's Storybook Dictionary. And that's when I was a very, very young child.
My son loved Richard Scarry so much.
Richard Scarry, they were fantastic. And What Do People Do All Day? And there's a whole range of real classics. When I was small, my mum would tell you that I learnt to read with the Storybook Dictionary.
Okay, how about something when you were at New York University that stayed with you?
Oh, crikey. I read masses, and what did I love?
I'm sure.
On one hand, I love things like I read Beowulf in the original Anglo-Saxon.
Oh, interesting.
You had to do a language, and I thought Anglo-Saxon. So for a year, I was learning Anglo-Saxon, and I had to do and that was fantastic because you can really see the sinews from which Tolkien derived all his kind of strength, and so all modern fantasy that we use,
that's cool.
It starts with Beowulf and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Have you ever faked reading a classic?
Yeah, I'm sure. In fact, I definitely didn't do at university. I didn't do the Victorians paper because there was no way I was going to sit there and read all these big fat novels. War and Peace. I read it, but I got to the last chapter. And the last chapter of War and Peace is just him talking about his theories of war. It's got nothing to do with the story at all. And I was so outraged by the fact it was boring, sort of 50 pages, that on principle, I didn't read the last chapter. So I read everything apart from the last.
Wow, you read that whole
It was kind of like a symbolic gesture of rebellion.
Yeah, all right. Okay, and you, with your 3 kids,
Yeah.
what book have you really loved curling up with them and reading to them when they were young?
One of my favourites is... do you know Mo Willems?
Yes.
Do you know the Elephant and Piggy series?
Oh, love Elephant and Piggy.
I'm such a fan of Elephant and Piggy. Yeah. And there's one called We Are in a Book.
We Are in a Book.
Which I read to my middle son. And he was very small, like sort of 3 or something, and he just laughed like a drain. He thought it was the funniest thing in the world. And that joy, the joy of that book,
you'll never forget that.
I will never forget that moment of just sitting with him and laughing.
Yeah. Great. Okay, A+. Good job on that quiz.
Thank you very much.
And Jonathan, congratulations on number 4 of the Lockwood and Co. books.
Thank you.
The Creeping Shadow. So please come back and see us when book number 5 comes out.
I would love to. Thank you so much.
Great conversation with Jonathan Stroud about his 4th book in the Lockwood & Company series. It's called The Creeping Shadow. And you're going to love it because if you love ghost stories and you love a little mystery, you're going to love this one. Thanks for joining me on Authors Revealed.